Hello everyone, welcome to VizConnect, connecting you with the art of data visualization and storytelling. My name is Sagar Kapoor. I'm part of customer success team at Tableau. So all the sessions which are presented in VizConnect are uploaded to our VizConnect YouTube page. Go ahead, subscribe to it. Some great content waiting for you. We have a LinkedIn community. Go ahead, join this particular community, learn from each other and get inspired by each other. With that, let me go ahead and introduce our speakers for today's session. I have Sam Parsons and Christian Felix. Let me go ahead and introduce Sam. Sam works as a lead data visualization developer for Dyson Technology Limited. He spends 90% of his work time using Tableau and other 10% working in Adobe Illustrator. He starts with keeping his team VizGame on top of the latest trends and as such works in a wide range of formats from dashboard development, infographics, and data lead posters. Outside of work, he is a co-leader for the Southwest Tableau user group and enjoys experimenting with data Viz on his Tableau public profile. With that, I will hand it over to Sam to talk about design to engage. Sam, over to you.
Hello. Okay. Hopefully I should be able to share my screen. Let's go with this. Can you tell me when you can see my screen? Okay. I'm going to assume that you can see my screen. Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day to everybody who join us today. Thank you to Sky and the VizConnect team for inviting me to talk to you. This is my first presentation for VizConnect, so I'm massively excited to talk to you on this topic of design to engage. So, as I was just briefly introduced, I'm a lead data visualization developer for Dyson and co-lead for the Southwest England Tableau user group. I work at Dyson over in the UK in England, and in England we have the main facility in Malmesbury. We've got a few thousand engineers there on site, and that's top image of the wavy building. That is where we work. That is our office. And in Dyson, I work as part of the Global Quality and Sustainability team. And part of what we do there is we look at the reliability and the failure rates of our products when they're out with customers. We look at safety issues, we look at emerging issues in market. We have connected data from our purifiers. We analyze all of that stuff, and we've recently merged with the sustainability team. So we are looking now at new data in our carbon footprint and also looking at our suppliers and our contract manufacturers and their employee conditions. So it is a very wide-ranging sort of set of data that I work with, and as part of that, I build dashboards, reports, make over old reports and build infographics and even data-led posters. So it's a lot of fun. It's a campus-based place over in the UK. Our head office is in Singapore. I also use Tableau Public. What I use Tableau Public for is to just experiment with data viz in Tableau. So doing all the stuff that you wouldn't really be able to put onto a business dashboard. And here's a few examples of stuff that I do on my Tableau Public profile. I'll just really quickly bring them up on screen. So recently, or this year, collaborated with Simon Beaumont and Lorna Eden on this project. I helped Eva Murray produce her book cover for her latest book, which is out now, and I did that using Illustrator. I compete in Iron Viz. I helped Sarah Bartlett guest host a recent edition of Iron Quest, and I've also guest hosted Sports Viz Sunday. I take part in Viz for Social Good. And I also like to make over old versions or old Viz days that I have on my profile. You'll find that in my profile, a lot of my designs are very different. I try to just play with different elements of design, and a lot of it isn't going to be sort of applicable back to business dashboards in your day work. But what I will say is when experimenting in this sort of stuff, you find little nuggets of gold that you can take back into your everyday work. I don't do everything in Tableau. Sometimes I play around with other tools, and that's really essentially what I like to do. But that's not what I'm talking to you about today. Today, we are going to talk about interactive resumes, and this quote is a very famous quote. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. And that's attributed to Oscar Wilde or Will Rogers. I'm not sure who Will Rogers is, but nobody really knows who actually originated that quote. It's one of those two people. And essentially, your CV or your resume is your foot in the door to getting a new job. You need to make a very good impression with that. So today we're going to cover what an interactive resume or CV should be, in my opinion. How to plan your resume design to try to really get people to engage with it, and the process of optimizing your overall design and what I do to do that. And if we have time, if we don't run out of time, we'll have a little deep dive into some of the interactivity that I built within my own CV. And this is my interactive resume. I always trip over calling it a CV or a resume, but anyway. This is unashamedly, I'm going to be talking about this because I can't bring up anybody else's resume and talk about that. It's a very personal thing. So it does seem quite narcissistic of me to be talking about this, talking about myself and my own design. But because it is a personal subject, I'm going to have to focus on what I've done. Let's talk traditional resumes versus interactive. So are traditional resumes old-fashioned now? Have they gone? Have they had their time? But on the other side of things, have interactive resumes gone too far? So what do I mean by this? So let's have a look. This is an example of an old traditional resume. It's actually the CV or the resume that I submitted to Dyson 2 years ago to land my visualization role. It is a very typical very typical example, that's the word I was looking for, of a traditional resume. It's built in Word. It's very uninteresting. It's not really going to capture a recruiter's attention. They will see 10 to the penny of these resumes hit their inbox during their working careers. So it's not really going to stand out. I spend a lot of my time on this resume wasting 50% of the space talking about what jobs I used to do, but not really giving any detail as to what I did in those roles. It's not going to stand out in any way. It means what I did do correctly on this, though, is I put my Tableau public link on there. And it was that link that really caught the interest of Dyson. When they clicked into it, they went to my profile and they saw what I could actually do, which is absolutely key visualization role. You cannot just talk about visualization. You have to show people what you can do. And it was on the strength of that Tableau public profile. Bear in mind that was 2 years ago, so I only actually had about 8 vises on my Tableau public profile because I'd only started using Tableau public about 2-3 months beforehand. On the strength of that, that's what I landed the role, and I presented that in my interview on a big screen. On the flip side, moving forward, we're now into a world where we can use or we can create interactive resumes. Tableau Public have an interactive resume gallery of a collection of all people using Tableau Public and creating their own versions of what they believe an interactive resume should be. Now, immediately from a recruiter's point of view, this is eye-catching. It is different to what we just saw from the standard Word documents that get submitted. But when we look through the collection of resumes, they are very similar to each other. They all are using a lot of space to talk about what their jobs were previously. So effectively, they're doing exactly what I did in the traditional resume, but they're putting it into an interactive version and using a lot of space to still talk about that. They tend to like to quantify their own skills by saying I'm a 8 out of 10 in Tableau and a 6 out of 10 in Alteryx. And some people use like to use words. So I'm an expert in Tableau. I'm an intermediate in SQL. What does that actually mean, though? This is where I start to wonder whether or not these interactive resumes have gone a little bit too far in the fact that we're using Tableau. Tableau is great for producing charts, so let's chuck charts on everything that we do on our resume. We have to remember these resumes are to sell us. It's our foot in the door. We need to capture attention, and we need to really present who we are, and we need to really intrigue the hiring managers to think to themselves that they want to bring you in to talk to you more. So what I think that these need to do a little bit more of is selling themselves. Tips on selling yourself is to start off with, get a piece of paper, get a Word document, whatever, and list out what are your drivers, what are the core things that make you tick, what drives you forward, because you need to put that onto your resume so that a hiring manager, so you can present that to a hiring manager or a recruiter to really capture their interest in you. What is this candidate about? Who are they? It seems to be that people are recruiting, or good companies are recruiting more about people than the skills that they hold. And if they believe that they've captured a good person, then they can upskill you and fill those gaps while you're in role. So let's take a look at build. I'm going to come out of this and we're going to look at how did I go about building this. Hopefully they'll have time to look at the interactive element. So I'm going to bring up Adobe Illustrator. Adobe Illustrator is my tool of choice. Previously, I used to mock up my Vizes or my designs using pen and paper, and that would be my quick way of doing it. I now got to a point with Illustrator where I feel that I can quickly mock up designs to the level that I want them. They are then adjustable, and I can make them pixel perfect before I replicate them in Tableau. So this is a stripped down version of my resume or CV. To start off with, I made this a dark dashboard. And the reason I made this a dark dashboard was because I would assume that in an interview situation, I might put this on a big screen. And I like dark dashboards on a big screen. They look very good. They show up well. To start off with, I took a little inspiration from the community. Took inspiration from this viz here, Sleeping Habits by Utah. And it's a lovely example of a radial chart. And what I particularly liked about it was it's a dark dashboard and the radial is cut off. And it's quite interesting. You're not showing the full circle of the radial. And it's a timeline going round the corner or round the radial. And it's gone. I wanted to replicate that in my viz somewhere. So first point that I need to put into my CV or resume is that I need to tell that story of my job history. It is still key. What I don't want to do though is I don't want to take up all my real estate on this resume talking about my old job history. So what I decided to do was, well, I would replicate that by bringing that to a radial on the side, and I'll turn it into a curved Gantt chart. That is the full amount of real estate that I want to give this part of my resume. I don't want to put any more into it. So I've got no space to put words on here. So it forces me to make this interactive. Step in this is that this full space here, I want to use to tell me and about my drivers. So that's what I did. I replicated the curve of the radial to basically align each segment to that curve and replicate it around. So effectively I drew that out and I created segments. And I listed out 3 core values that are core values to me. And I called out one piece of signature work that I could talk in a little bit more in depth. And these core values are core values to me, as I said, growth, community, and creativity. When creating your own version, I would implore you to think of your own values or your own things that are pertinent to you. You might not be looking for a job as a visualization developer. You might be looking at it. You might be somebody in a data solutions team, data architecture. You might want to be talking about your personal strong feelings about moving data into a cloud space or doing Tableau online or whatever, you might want to bring that in and talk about that on here and what have you been doing to sort of strengthen that perception. You might blog about Python solutions. You might want to talk about that on here because that might be key to you. But for me, it was about growth, community, and creativity. And I wanted in these sections to strengthen what these mean to me and how I've been furthering myself with those. And the idea is that this is going to be very different to a standard resume that a recruiter or a hiring manager will see, and they will learn a little bit about me. So I talk about public speaking, like today, challenging myself to talk to other people and help other people learn. Skill training of myself to keep myself developing, mentoring other people. So this is a of learning how to give feedback to others whilst also helping others in their career. Talking about the initiatives that I get involved in the community, Tableau user groups, but also internal communities. And then right on the end, I've got creativity. And creativity obviously is key for a visualization developer. But I have run out of space on my resume when building this. And this is actually key. It was deliberately placed over here in the least amount of space. My idea for my resume was I want to showcase my work, but showcase it within the resume. I don't want a link that takes the recruiter away to a different site and lose where my resume is. I want it all within my resume so they don't lose it, but also it gives me the chance to put words, my own words, against my own visualizations. But how am I going to do that? I've run out of space. I've got no space to put it in here. So I'm going to have to become creative about how I do that. So I thought, well, I'll drop in a chart. I'll make a chart, and this can be the part of interactive from Tableau. I don't know how it's going to work. I haven't got to that point yet of how am I going to create a chart where you click on a bubble and it will show me stuff. But that is how I'm going to challenge myself with my own skill set. And if I can't do it, then it's not worth keeping the resume. I'll have to come up with a new idea. So that was one element. What I'm not doing on here is putting charts on for chart's sake of just showing I'm using Tableau, I can build a pie chart. I'm not doing that. I'm trying to tell a story of who I am. So I'm now looking at this going, well, what else would benefit from a bit of interactivity to tell a bit more about the story? So immediately I'm looking at public speaking. Well, I've not really got room to talk about what I'm doing in the public speaking space. Maybe I can drop in a chart there that will help. So I dropped in a dot plot with the idea that you would hover on a dot plot and it would give you that information about what have I spoken about and where have I spoken. I've got a little space over here that potentially I could talk the design framework, but I didn't want it to become too text heavy. What I thought would fit really nicely as an overall design, because I think that I'm a visual person, is maybe I drop in some bubbles that would replicate this design on the right over here on the left. So let's do that. I'll drop in some bubbles. And this is something where I decided, look, I'll call these out as milestones. So key points in my career that would be actually quite interesting to know about. And the last thing was my skill. I've gone through the Tableau learning paths earlier in the year. So it'd be nice to show that I've done those, and I can put in some interactivity where you click a button and you can scroll through, see what I've done in my own certifications. And this was built on a sort of a horizontal line that mirrored the horizontal lines coming across. So in a nutshell, there we have it. That's my CV built in Illustrator, and I need to replicate that in Tableau. Now, we need to understand who our audience is before we do that. I scroll into the Gantt chart because it's a good example. If I'm a recruiter, I will probably not know about Tableau and what Tableau does and how it works. When you put stuff on Tableau Public, things do not always render as they show in desktop. And I want my CV and my resume to be as professional as I can make it. So I need to build this chart in Tableau. We all know that we can do these sort of lines by doing identification going from point to point and curving it around a curve. If I put this in Tableau as a line chart, I get a little bit of funky interactivity, which is not great UX, and it is not something from an everyday person would expect. And what I'm talking about is when you select on one of these lines, if it was a line mark in Tableau, you actually pick on a point that's made up the full line and it highlights a circle. So that's not the interaction that I want. I could make these as shapes in Tableau and plot those as using shapes. Again, that is not quite as professional as what I want, because shape marks come in as raster images and they pixelate if you have them blown up. So maybe you're on a big screen. I don't want any instance where something becomes less than perfect. So I didn't want to use shape marks. So which leads me to say that I needed to create these using polygons. But crikey, how am I going to create those using polygons? Well, luckily, I'm using Illustrator, and Illustrator is set up in such a way that I can really understand these vector graphics that it's drawing. So how do I do that? Well, luckily, if I zoom these marks, zoom on the red one, you might be able to see that better. I can select this this bar or this line, and you will be able to see that it slightly highlights around the edge of it. So this is the vector of drawing this shape. But where the curves change, I get anchor points. And if I hover on them, you can see I get XY coordinates of anchor points. This is key. I can understand now, by having drawn this, where I would need to plot in Tableau from an XY coordinate position. But that coordinate position is going from my rulers. My rulers, if you see at the top, I don't even know where 0 is. 0 is all the way over here somewhere. Luckily, in Illustrator, I can grab the top corner, and if you're able to see it, there's like a crosshair appearing across the screen, and I can place where my 0 point starts. So now, when I'm in Illustrator, those XY coordinates are coming from this corner point here, which is where I built the radial from. So now I can use basic trigonometry, XY coordinates, to understand my radius position, and that's allowing me to understand how to plot the points going from one end of the curve to the other end of the curve, which is down here. And then I can plot the points going round, use the maths to work that out, and then plot the points on the outer edge and a background on the end. So effectively what I did in Tableau was I plotted these using 180 points along this line, 180 points around the corner, 180 points around the edge, and 180 points around that edge. But I'm not going to talk to you today about exactly how I using Excel and the maths to do that. But effectively, what I'm saying is I can replicate this in Illustrator or build it in Illustrator, and I can use Illustrator to help me replicate this in Tableau. Again, I needed to do the same thing on this chart here. So I've built this, and I'm working out, well, how am I going to build it in Tableau? If I built this as a standard circle or bubble plot, I would need to create this effect, I would need an image that would overlay this circle to cut off the circle. But I don't want to do that, because then the image would be overlaying over the top and I wouldn't be able to interact with the circle. So I need to build this circle out of polygons. So again, I can get those points using Illustrator, getting the XY coordinates when I select on points, and I can work out the inner radius from this point, and I can work out the outer radius from the center of the circle. So that makes that quite easy. Over here in the bubble charts, I can do exactly the same thing. And luckily, this little icon here in Illustrator allows me to find the center point of shapes that I select. So I could select on a circle, and that center point, if I move this to the top corner, then these coordinates change. So making sure that that's in the middle, I get exactly the right coordinate position. These as a bubble chart. So you're seeing that I have designed the overall resume, how I want to tell my story, and now I'm understanding how I'm going to build that in Tableau. We go into Tableau quickly, or Tableau Public. You can see the end solution. It needs to reload itself. And I'll take the opportunity to take a drink. So, is it finished? Of course, it's going to do this when I want to talk to you about it. Come on, you silly thing. Okay, tell you what, we'll leave that. Let's move into Tableau desktop. So I've now built this in Tableau desktop, and I was going to show what it was doing with the interactivity on public, but we can do that. If I go into the Gantt chart here to talk about what I was saying about the lines, if I change this to a line chart, you can see the edge has now been the edge is now visible for where I've plotted using the trigonometry. If I select on the line chart, you get that circle up here. That's the interactivity that I don't want to happen, because people who are not Tableau people are not going to understand what's happened there. If I make it that polygon, then it highlights the whole polygon, and that's the interactivity that I'm looking for from this. Let's take that off. I'm going to sort of dive into, just quickly, how I built the interactivity of this, where you click on a chart and it brings up my, my visualization with my words, and you can still click on this and you can go into the actual visualization if you want to, and it will load up, or it should do, it will load up that is. Right. I'm able to interact with charts still, but also have a visualization that appears over the top of everything, and that is still interactive. How do I do that? Well, first of all, let's just quickly dive into this chart here. So this is a very, very simple bubble chart. It's built with XY coordinates, and it's built from set here in Excel. It's a very straightforward data set. I have 4 lines per circle in that bubble chart. I've just got the color of the circle, the middle, so the plot, where I'm plotting that circle, and the size of the circle. And then some other details, but I've also got an X2 and a Y2, which is what's giving me those 4 rows to each circle. And I've got my link to my visualization for the action. So that is driving the bubble chart itself. Moving this, but what is happening is I have a sheet that's overlaying the whole of this visualization. I go into that sheet, see there's nothing in it at the moment, but it's using those X2 and Y2s. Ignore the fact that it's dual axis. This one is irrelevant. That's just left over from a different window that I created for the certifications where you click through. But in here, I've got a filter action applied on circle. Circle is the number of the circle that has been selected. So what is happening with that? This is an underused feature in Tableau, in my opinion, certainly in Tableau public space. And this is background images. I've got a number of background images produced in Illustrator that I've created. So have a look at Six Nations. I go into this. You can see now, this is the view that we see when I select that bubble. It has been set to the X2 and Y2 positions on that Excel sheet, and it's showing, and it's been set to the full dimensions of the dashboard. But this only appears when we apply a filter to the background image. So when the circle filter is set to 4, this image appears. When the circle filter is set to number 1, I get an image for the prime property viz. When it's 10, I talk about Mapbox. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't realize is available in background images. How that works, I click on the full Six Nations viz, and then if I go into that, you'll see now that I'm filtered on number 4, and now it's appeared in this sheet. I've got this tooltip appearing saying select open in new tab. How is that appearing? I'm actually plotting a polygon over the full size of this worksheet, and to sort of show you exactly how I'm doing that, let's just make it a bit more visible. So I've got circle points, I've got 4 points, those are my 4 rows in that data set, where I'm plotting the polygon over the top. The polygon was set to being completely opaque so you wouldn't see it. And that's giving me that interaction, the dashboard action, interact with it. It takes that interaction and sends you to that URL. This is still working over the top of these charts here. How come these are still interactive? The trick is these charts are actually over the top of this. What happens is, and you can see it, if I highlight, this is the box or the worksheet for the talks. If I highlight over here, then that's the detail from the Gantt chart. This is the Gantt chart. Over somewhere around here should be the milestones. There's the milestones. Down here is to do with my certifications. They are all overlaying. So what's happening with these sheets is when I select a bubble, it's updating a parameter. And that parameter, when this is selected and this is in view, that parameter goes to number 1. The talks worksheet with the dot plot is set to only show when the parameter is 0. So effectively, I'm turning off all these charts, all this interaction, when I've brought this into view. And when I unclick it, they come back in again because the parameter, which one of these parameters down here, is actually set to 0. So then that means that this appears. So that is effectively how I'm getting this interaction. I've got no collapsible containers in this viz at all. These are all working through background images and the filtering and parameters and the layering of one over the other. I use collapsible containers, and the reason for that is that when you're in Tableau desktop, you can create yourself a nice little icon or a circle icon that will highlight around that circle icon. If you publish that to Tableau public, you lose that interaction. It highlights the whole of the area, so you get a box appear, and it's that sort of level of detail on what people who are non-Tableau people would expect to see. And this is how I didn't want anything funky like that happening through nuances in Tableau that we know about, that other people wouldn't know about. So hopefully this gives you all a bit of an insight as how I built what I built, but why I built it this way. How it's telling that story of who I am and what is core to me, bringing that to the forefront of what I want to present to somebody, to a recruiter or somebody who could be potentially hiring me. I think with these CVs, if you're going to produce one, you've got to be confident enough to say that is the only thing that I'm going to send to people. I'm not going to send them a Word document like I normally would do. And with that, if I come back in, yeah, and then I think that is it. I don't think I missed anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam, for sharing that great approach to go ahead and create the CV or resume. I hope everyone will go ahead and try it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So next we have Christian. Let me go ahead and give a short introduction about Christian. So Christian works at Roche Tissue Diagnostic in Tucson, Arizona, where he develops visual analytics in Tableau to help people see and understand their data. He is a former Tableau featured author and current Tableau ambassador, Desktop certified associate, and Iron Viz champion of 2020. He has a master's degree in finance from the University of Arizona and has completed graduate coursework in analytics at Texas. So without further ado, Christian, over to you.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, let me go ahead and put it in presentation mode. Let's see, let's present. Okay, thank you for the introduction. As mentioned, I'm here to talk today about Iron Viz, and particularly some lessons learned over the course of my participation in the competition, with the hopes of helping future participants out as they seek to win the competition next year. Just a little bit more about me. I do work at Roche. From the description of Sam's job at Dyson, it does sound like we fill very similar roles at different companies. I work with a lot of service data, doing on-market surveillance for our product and instrument quality. And I do work with Tableau every day and have done so for the last 5 years at Roche. I also help lead the Tucson Tableau user group, and I am, as mentioned, the 2020 Iron Viz champion. Just to provide some additional context, so this was the visualization that I produced during the competition. It's called The Air We Breathe, and it really focuses on highlighting the global disparities in air pollution, and also one of the primary drivers, which is nominal GDP per capita. So the objective of today's talk, I have 30 minutes, it's going to be going relatively quick just to get a lot in, but really it's not intended to be a technical deep dive into how I developed the Viz. It's more intended to provide some practical recommendations for the next year's participants, and also some philosophical insight into why I chose to develop the Viz the way that I did. Just some context on the timeline. So things were very, very tight this year, and I think they were even more so compared to prior years. So the announcement was made September 4th as to who qualified for the competition. We got the data the next day on the 5th, and all of this was ultimately pre-recorded, just like everything else from the Tableau conference, about a couple of weeks prior to actually broadcasting live. So from announcement of the results till recording of the 20-minute build, we had roughly 2 weeks. I believe 16 days was the total amount. So within those 16 days, obviously you're analyzing the data, you're cleaning the data, you're putting together a visualization that you need to do live during the competition, and then you're practicing it to ensure that you can actually do it. So things that I determined were very critical, and things that I would just mention as things to practice as you develop possibly towards competing in Iron Viz are the things listed here. So finding the critical story. What is the most important thing that needs to be drawn out from the data set you're using? Keeping that story front and center. I think so often it's easy to just provide a whole lot of detail in your visualization, and that can be good sometimes, but sometimes it can also obscure the main point of the story. And then pushing through doubt. So Iron Viz in particular, but any sort of data visualization activity, you're going to have times where you're wondering what you got yourself into, or if what you're producing is good enough, and practicing pushing through those things and actually finishing what you started exercises your willpower and discipline, and is a good practice to have. These are the 5 things that I want to talk about this morning. So, and encourage you, if you are interested in participating in Iron Viz, to cultivate. 1, learning Tableau prep. Data prep changes everything. 2, becoming a storyteller. 3, becoming a designer. As we saw from Sam, you can do some amazing things with some design skills. 4, becoming a student. And lastly, having fun. So data prep changes everything. Learn Tableau prep. So what does it change? The data you can use, first of all, the visuals you can build, the analysis you can perform, the performance of that visualization, and the efficiency of your build. First of all, you're going to get data in Iron Viz or anything in real life, and it's going to be messy. This is for my European football fans out there. This is not the same messy, but hopefully it helps communicate the point. So this is just a segment of my prep flow. In prep, if you're used to it, it gives you a count of the operations you have in a single component. Here, this is showing I had 33 cleaning steps. The data was very, very messy. So why so many cleaning steps? Well, I wanted to take advantage of the full data set possible. And what we were provided from Tableau was the following. So we had these 2 data sets. Listed in the data set documentation was the following: 343 cities in this one, 3,000 cities in this data set, if you were to combine the two, you could possibly get 230 of the cities. And so I wanted to do as best I could at cleaning the data to ensure that I got those 230 cities. The problem is sometimes cities, more often than not, like any data, can be differently labeled or can appear differently in the actual data. So there's lots of different ways to say the same exact thing. Here are just some examples. So this required all sorts of data cleaning. I spent the first really few days in Tableau prep cleaning the data just to ensure that I could extract these 230 cities from both the data sets. And again, I was determined to use as much of the data as possible to conduct the analysis and tell the story. Okay, this is just to highlight the evolution that's taking place within Iron Viz and data viz in general. This is looking back over the last few years of Iron Viz final competitions. And what I want to highlight here is just the evolution. So if you look at 2017, just a few years ago, the dashboards are obviously very good. But notice the chart types. So we have area charts, we have diverging bar charts, a bit of a stream graph here, maybe a chloropleth map here, lines, and a hex map. We get into 2018, we have this amazing thing built by Ludovic Tavernier, this amazing radial chart. We have this globe that turns, and going into last year, we have this amazing design from Hesham, and again, a tile map from Josh. So the point is that, yes, there was evolution within the tool. There was new functionality introduced over that time span, but there was also data prep tools introduced into the competition that allowed the competitors to do some really amazing work pre-competition to densify data, to manipulate it so that these amazing new innovative charts can be built. And that's going to continue going forward. So if you're interested in competing in Iron Viz, it's in your best interest to learn data prep, as it allows you to do many, many things in terms of visuals. Okay, a bit of a tangent here, but follow with me. Finding a story. Oftentimes, I think it can be difficult for us to find stories as data viz developers. But what I would want to point out is sometimes it's not really our job to find a story. It's our job to make a story that's already been told more compelling and bring it to life. And so when I was looking for my story in Iron Viz, I initially went to the data, but ultimately I came back to the very thing that was front and center in the data source documentation, and that was this. Populations in low-income cities are most impacted by air pollution. 97% of cities in low and middle-income countries with more than 100,000 inhabitants do not meet the WHO air quality guidelines. And so I said, if that was true, if that shows up in the data, that is a story that needs to be told, that I wanted to tell with my dashboard. And so what I did was I started from there. I went to the data, and what I always typically do is just create scatter plots, particularly when I'm working with data that's very wide, that has a lot of different variables, a lot of measures, and I'm trying to understand a single measure. So in this case, I'm trying to understand air pollution. And what I do if I have a data set like this is I just create scatter plots that helps me understand the relationships. So we have all these different variables: traffic congestion, evening, morning traffic congestion, travel time, total final consumption, GDP, both purchasing power parity and nominal, population. And all of these, to varying extents, are related, correlated to annual mean concentrations of PM2.5 air pollution. But what I noticed is that, in particular, these GDP measures seem to have a very high correlation. And I noticed one thing in the data that I wanted to drill into deeper, and that was what's shown here. So we're looking at 3 different measures of GDP found in the data. These two, on both the left and the right, have x-axes that are fairly similar. However, when we look at nominal GDP per capita in US dollars, we're looking at millions and millions of dollars. And we have seemingly all these observations that are on the 0 x-axis. So I thought, okay, that's a bit funny. It's worth drilling into in more detail. And when I did that, what I found is there appeared to be all these outliers in the data. So you have these countries below the red rectangle here: Oslo, Norway; Zurich, Switzerland; Stockholm, Sweden; Portland, and San Francisco, that in terms of nominal GDP per capita rank very high globally. Then you have these other countries above them in India, Mexico, Turkey, that are exponentially higher in value. And I apologize for not having the values here, but these to me appeared to be errors in the data. I've never been to these places, but the assumption that I was making was that people living in them were not enjoying a nominal GDP in US dollars per capita of millions of dollars, which is what the data showed. So when I removed those 9 records from the data set, it allowed me to see this relationship. Looking at it from a linear trend showed this, but even more powerfully in terms of statistical significance was this power trend line. And the trend line is important because what it shows is that for a given unit of nominal GDP increase, the effect on air pollution is actually much higher for cities with low GDP than it is for cities with high GDP. Cities that currently have high GDP, if the GDP was to increase for a given unit, would move in almost a horizontal manner, whereas cities with low GDP for a given unit of GDP increase would move pretty dramatically down the y-axis. And so what I did was I used the formula that Tableau produced from this trend line, and I just modeled the GDP changes and how those were to impact PM25. It allowed me to create this simulation within my dashboard that I think was really powerful because it allowed a user to see how changes in GDP would potentially change air pollution and would allow a city to go from unhealthy air quality to moderately healthy air quality, ultimately to healthy air quality. Okay, and so going back to Tableau Prep, what it allowed me to do was take these calculations that were pretty resource heavy in terms of embedding them directly in the desktop tool and migrate them downstream to Tableau Prep and union the data. So I'm densifying it here, but I'm embedding the calculation and the output in Tableau Prep such that when I get it in desktop tool, it's just really a hard-coded number and allows performance to increase. Okay, so these are some resources that I just wanted to share with everybody in case they were just getting started in Tableau Prep or interested. There's, of course, a Prep in Data challenge that's put on weekly by the community. There's a book released by Carl Alchin called Tableau Prep Up and Running. And there's resources from Tableau that go from just getting started to intermediate to more advanced topics with Tableau Prep. So these are some things that you'll have in the slides after my presentation to access yourself if you'd like. Okay, secondly, become a storyteller. So what makes for a memorable story? So 2 things in my opinion: content and contact. This is a snapshot of a text message stream that was going back and forth between me and my supervisor as I was preparing for Iron Viz. So really what I was communicating to her, to Sasha, was that in the Viz, I was really trying to have 3 components. 1, make very clear the problem that was being experienced. 2, highlight the contributing factor or factors, in this case, GDP, wealth inequality. And 3, also provide at least a glimpse of hope and a solution to resolve the problem. In terms of contact, Josh Smith did a great job last year during the Iron Viz competition. And if you've seen this, you know how well Josh really connected with the audience. So he had a great story. The content was great in the dashboard. The content in his story was really good, but he really brought it to life by connecting emotionally with the audience. And I think that really earned him some significant points in the competition. Some resources to improve your storytelling. One, I think as Sam mentioned, presentations to your local Tableau user group. Great opportunity to really get involved and to practice your storytelling and your presentation skills. Toastmasters. So I confess, I was horrible at presenting, at public speaking. After graduating college, I did a few years just practicing that, focusing on my public speaking skills in a Toastmasters program, and I believe it really helped me out. There's a book called Talk Like TED, has some real practical guidance on presenting. It's by an individual named Carmine Gallo. I would recommend that as well as a book by Amy Cuddy called Presence. These are just a few resources amongst many, in my opinion, that can help with storytelling and public speaking. Okay, so continuing in the same vein as Sam's presentation, becoming a designer. Becoming a designer can help you out tremendously in your data visualization journey and in Iron Viz. So all three of us this year in the competition did this, I believe. We pre-baked or pre-designed a canvas to then drag onto our dashboard as an image. For me, this was nothing complex. It was just a very basic visual component that, first of all, improved the speed of my build. I wasn't having to drag a lot of text into my dashboard during the competition, but also I think it really added a nice visual experience. And I was able to do it all beforehand prior to the competition. So certainly the trend we're seeing in the larger data visualization community is that design is becoming more and more of a necessary skill to have. And in Iron Viz, I believe that trend will continue. So learning how to become better at graphic design and learning any one of the many tools to improve your graphic design skills will be well worth your time. Obviously, a lot of people do it in PowerPoint. It's free, it's easy. Figma, Adobe Illustrator, as we saw from Sam. Any one of these resources can help you add some really nice visual flair and features to your Tableau dashboards. Okay, so combining the last two, design plus story. So for Iron Viz, I think this is particularly important. Our default setting for those of us working in a business context goes to something like this. This is very functional, very useful, contains a lot of information, but there's not really a clear and compelling story that jumps out from this. And so I think the paradigm shift that needs to happen in an competition like Iron Viz is going from a data analyst to a data journalist. So the data journalist's job really is to tell a story. The visual piece is just one component of that. It's an important component, but really the objective of the visual piece is to further the story that the data journalist is trying to tell. And so here was one piece that really inspired me for my visualization in Iron Viz. And really this entire year with the pandemic, I think has really furthered the whole field of data visualization significantly. There have been so many different visuals that have really stood out that I think will be remembered long past this season that we've each seen. This one was from the Wall Street Journal. And really the key here is you have this tremendous jobless data point in, I believe, March. And what the visual designer did was they really made it stand out by making it basically come all the way up to the top of the page really using it as almost a border for this text column. And so to me, I saw this and I was like, this really brought this story to life. It showed just how different this particular data point was compared to prior data points. And so what I wanted to do was do something similar, where I was designing my user experience in the Viz in a similar way that really made this change stand out. So here we're looking at cities, here we're looking at people, and when this parameter gets changed, this bar chart goes really off the chart. And I wanted that to happen. I used a reference line to allow that to happen, just to convey that huge stark change in the dashboard. Now, I wasn't the only one that did that. This is another newspaper article from, I believe, just recently, showing a similar technique where they have this bar chart going off the page just to communicate the magnitude of the quantity and the difference. And this was one of the most famous graphics viewed during the coronavirus season. I think maybe one of the most famous graphics viewed ever. It's a simulation by the Washington Post, and it's really simulating the spread of the virus. And so I knew if there's any way possible to introduce some sort of simulation component into my dashboard, it could have a similarly powerful effect. Okay, so I know I'm running out of time here, so just continuing on, becoming a student. So becoming a student of prior competitions and competitors, and becoming a student of your SUVisor. The 2019 competition really featured 3 very different competitors bringing 3 very different skill sets to the competition. I mentioned Josh's storytelling. It was fantastic. He really connected with the audience. Lindsay really built this dashboard that was very business-like. She did it very efficiently and productively, and I'm sure it scored her points. And Hesham really had an amazing design. So looking at those 3 different competitors from last year, there was really 3 different things that I was able to extract and try and make my own, use and incorporate into my whole IRONVIZ process. So yeah, having that storytelling capacity like Josh did, designing a very clear and efficient visualization like Lindsay, and making it come to life in a very impactful way like Hesham did. And lastly, your SUVisor. So your SUVisor is there to really help you push through those times of doubt. They're there to run ideas past. They're there to be a sounding board, to challenge and encourage you. And I believe all of the SUVisors really are senior level Tableau employee type people, so they know their stuff. And so becoming a student of them, engaging them, learning from them can really help you in your design in IRONVIZ. Again, some more resources. Number 1, your SUVisor. You can leverage them to help you in your design process. There's blog posts, one by Sarah Bartlett that she produced a couple of years ago after she won a qualifier and was preparing to participate in a final competition. Josh Milligan, similarly, after he participated, produced a blog post of how to really improve your speed when you're designing in Tableau. And this was one that I produced just a couple of weeks ago that is really in conjunction with this presentation. So all of these are good resources to prepare you for next year when you qualify for that IRONVIZ final. And lastly, have fun. So it is stressful, it is a lot of work, but you'd be doing yourself a disservice if you weren't able to have fun and enjoy the process all the way through. It is a once in a lifetime thing, and you're developing a camaraderie with your your fellow competitors. And so enjoy the process, savor it for what it is, and have fun. And with that, I will conclude, turn it back over to Sagar and open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Christian. I think thank you for all the inspiration and motivation for everyone to participate in our next Iron Viz. So with that, we will just go ahead and take a couple of questions quickly. So if you have any questions, just go ahead, put it into chat. Happy to ask Christian and Sam about it. So I think I can go ahead and start. I have one question for you, both Sam and Christian. What is the importance of feedback and mentor in your career with respect to data visualization and storytelling? Maybe we can start with Sam and then Christian can go ahead and answer.
So that's quite interesting because I've never really felt that I've had a mentor for my own career. So if you look at the resume that I was just presenting, you'll see that I spent 14 years working in finance before I found Tableau. And it's just become more of an organic process with me. I reconnected with my university degree, which is in design engineering. So feedback, I do think feedback is important though. Obviously I do, because I'm part of the mentoring meetup, and I mentor other people to help progress those individuals. And also I started that initiative on the hashtag #DataFanFeedback on Twitter to really help those individuals looking to improve find a pathway on Twitter to get some responses and get some feedback on their work. For my own personal career, I can't really say that I've taken a lot. My position in Dyson, I've just really been lucky to fall into a position where I seem to be calling the shots within the team on what needs to happen. I'm not really getting an awful lot of people coming back to me and saying this is really what you need to do. So it's kind of an odd one for me personally, but it's obviously very important. I do try to feed back to others, and I try to give my opinion to others. I do have unofficial sort of people that I talk to about visits, but I very rarely go to people and say, this is what I've done, what do you think, how can I improve it? Because I kind of have this thought process of if other people are feeding into my work, it becomes less my work and more their work. And I like to learn from looking at other people's work themselves and diving into those vises and how they built them, like Christian's is Iron Viz, diving into that, seeing what's he done behind the scenes. But I maybe I'm just a little funny that I don't seem to reach out and look for that direct feedback myself. Yeah.
Thank you, Sam. Christian?
Yeah, I think I think early on in your journey, I think the biggest influences that you have are the people closest in proximity to you. So if you are just starting out, I think the importance of surrounding yourself, if at all possible, in your job with people who are very, very passionate about data viz, who are on the same path and road as you, can't be overstated. The Tableau community is great. It's a virtual community, and there's lots of inspiration to be had from networking with people there. But for me, the biggest inspiration and growth that I've experienced in this job at Roche has been just kind of like Sam was saying, by being blessed and fortunate to land in a good position that I got to work with people who were equally skilled in Tableau, who challenged me to learn new things. I'll mention his name here because he's not somebody who you'll find on Twitter or LinkedIn very much. He's very quiet, very humble, but he's a very excellent Tableau developer, Naveen Chebalu, and we've developed a great collaborative partnership over the years. And I've learned a lot from him in Tableau and just work ethic as well. And hopefully he can say the same for me. So the best advice I'd say I could give is just surround yourself with the people that you want to grow into, whose skills you want to emulate. And the closer proximity you can be to those people, the better.
Perfect. Thank you. With that, thank you, Sam. Thank you, Christian. It was an honor to have you on VizConnect. And I hope everyone will go ahead and follow all the best practices and tips and tricks shared by both of you. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for all those things. So with that, everyone, thank you for joining VizConnect. Be safe, take care of yourself, and we'll see you next week. Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a great weekend ahead.
Bye.
Bye.